So mindfulness is a set of practices that allows us to do, broadly speaking, two things. One of them is to pay attention in the present moment. The second one is to better regulate our emotions. There are two parts, I would say, to mindfulness practice. One of them involves the mental aspect, so that involves regulating our attention. And then secondly, there are some physical aspects, for example, breathing exercises and movement exercises. One key thing that these practices allow us to do is to go from awareness of our thoughts to awareness of the sensations in our bodies. So I'd start to answer this question by saying that what we practice grows stronger in general when it comes to the brain. So that goes for things like learning how to play the guitar, or if you want to develop an athletic ability, if you want to run faster or something like that. That practice will be reflected in how our brain looks. The same is true for our emotions. So the emotions that we experience a lot, you could think of that experience as practice. So if we ruminate, that is, if we think in a kind of repetitive way about things that are anxiety provoking, or for example angering, the areas in the brain that are connected to those emotions will grow stronger. Those areas will look bigger. And so we can see this in studies. For example, a study that came out of the University of Surrey a couple of years ago showed that people who practice mindfulness after just 6 weeks have smaller amygdalas. And the amygdala is an area of the brain that is closely connected to negative emotion, especially fear. There are many other similar studies. But I think a simpler way to describe this idea is with an image. And an image that I like is one of the garden. So if you imagine your mind as a garden, then the things that you want to see in your mind would be like the flowers, like something nice like a daffodil. And the things that you don't want to experience would be the weeds. So something like Japanese knotweed, say. And the weeds and the flowers both grow in certain conditions. So for negative emotions, one of those conditions is rumination. The more we ruminate, or think repetitively about things that provoke negative emotions, the more we'll experience those emotions. For positive emotions, it's kind of a similar thing. The best food for the daffodils in the garden, i.e. the positive emotions, is attention. But the default mode for all of us is to pay closer attention to negative things that are upsetting, angering, anxiety-provoking, or even physically painful. What we do over the course of a mindfulness, what we do during a mindfulness course is reverse that kind of inbuilt tendency to give more attention to negative emotions. And so that helps the daffodils thrive and helps the Japanese knotweed wither away. So I would say that lots of people, maybe even most people, can benefit from taking part in a mindfulness course. But I would say the people that gain the greatest benefit are people who spend a lot of time in their heads. So that could be anticipating the future, worrying about the future, people who spend a lot of time caught up in the past and regretting that, or people who are troubled by what I call sticky thoughts. Certain thoughts that stick around a lot and that are hard to put to one side, or that don't go away very easily. But in addition to people who spend a lot of time in their heads in that way, I would say that there's another bunch of people that can really benefit from practicing mindfulness. And those are people that I would say do a lot of rumination. So a lot of kind of repetitive focus on things that are happening in their mind, but they might not necessarily be thoughts. So mindfulness can be very beneficial for people with chronic pain, for example, because as you can imagine, chronic pain is something that would absorb a lot of your attention. There are other issues like tinnitus, which can do a similar thing. It can be very difficult to ignore, and that can be very frustrating. And issues like misophonia, which is a phenomenon where certain types of sounds can generate a really kind of strong negative reaction for people. So those are the kind of people that I think most benefit from practicing mindfulness. But another criterion to consider if you'd like to take part in the course is your ability to do so. So taking part in the course requires having 2 hours a week to attend a session, but also having about 30 minutes free a day where you can practice the exercises. The more you practice the exercises, the more benefit you'll experience for practicing mindfulness. So the first thing I would say is to read a description of the program on our webpage and see if it sounds appealing to you. If you'd still like to know a bit more, we run mindfulness taster sessions a few times a year, so you could come to one of them. In addition to that, I would say if you're the kind of person who likes to know about the evidence base for something before trying it out, there's a section on our webpage that will tell you about that. Alternatively, if you're someone who likes to hear a kind of a first-hand account of someone's experience practicing mindfulness, then there's a really good testimonial on our blog by my colleague Roshan Joyce that describes what practicing mindfulness did for her. So I'd recommend doing any or all of those things.